Have you ever witnessed a mother slap her own daughter at a family wedding in front of 250 guests?
No.
So, imagine this. You are at your sister's wedding. 250 guests, judges, attorneys, Atlanta's elite, all watching. And your mother has just handed you a stack of documents on a stage, demanding you sign over your $2 million penthouse as a wedding gift to your sister. You say no, and her palm connects with your face so hard your earring flies across the marble floor. That was my reality. April 19th, 2022. They expected me to cry, to apologize, to surrender the way I always had. Instead, I picked up my earring, walked out, and made one phone call. 1 hour later, a woman walked into that reception. When my mother saw who it was, she started screaming, because the person she had told everyone was senile and gone had just arrived with a lawyer and proof of everything she had been hiding. Welcome back to Calm Drama Chronicles, where real families reach the exact moment when everything held together by silence and assumption finally, publicly, falls apart. If you are the quiet one, the one who notices, the one who shows up, the one who never gets the credit, you are exactly where you belong. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, subscribe.
You're going to want to stay for this one.
Before I continue, let me tell you who I am, because it matters. My name is Paige Mercer. I am 30 years old, and I run a licensed event planning studio in Atlanta called Mercer & Company. I have 14 active clients. My revenue has doubled in the past 18 months. I specialize in corporate galas, charity fundraisers, and private celebrations for clients who need everything to be perfect and need someone they can trust completely to make it so. My mother, Diane Mercer, has referred to my business exactly once in public conversation. She called it Paige's little party planning thing. For people nodded like that explained something sad about me. I smiled and said nothing. Not correcting Diane has never meant not knowing. It has always meant waiting. To understand what happened at my sister's wedding, you have to understand where it all started. The call came on a Tuesday evening in March 2019. I was sitting in my home office in Decatur, reviewing vendor contracts for a client's corporate retreat, when my grandmother's name lit up my phone. Paige, sweetheart. Eleanor Mercer's voice was steady, the way it had always been steady. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. My grandmother had been a professor of law at Emory University for 28 years before retiring. She did not waste words. So when she told me she was updating her will and leaving me the penthouse at 240 Peachtree Tower, the one she had purchased in 2013 for $1.8 million, now valued at just over $2 million, I set down my pen and listened completely. Why me? I asked. Not because I didn't want it, because I genuinely didn't understand. Because you're the only one who visits, she said simply. Every Sunday for 10 years, Paige. While your mother sends Christmas cards and your sister sends nothing at all. You bring me tulips because you remember they're my favorite. You sit with me when I have nothing interesting to say. I felt tears before I expected to. The paperwork will be finalized next month, she continued. James Calloway is handling everything. He's been my attorney for 20 years. She paused. Your mother will not be pleased. That, as it turned out, was the understatement of the decade. The news leaked to my family within weeks. I still don't know how. Maybe someone at James' firm mentioned it to someone who knew someone. Atlanta's legal and social community is smaller than people think. What I know is that by April 2019, my mother had organized what she called a family discussion at her $4 million home in Buckhead. I walked into that living room and saw the way they were seated. My father, Robert, in the leather armchair. My mother, Diane, on the settee. My sister, Cassandra, perched on the arm of the couch like she was posing for a portrait. And next to Cassandra, this was new, this was something I had not expected, her boyfriend at the time, Brandon Whitmore, sitting with his legs crossed and a glass of my father's bourbon in his hand like he had been invited to a board meeting he already knew the outcome of. They had arranged themselves like a tribunal. and they had brought a witness.
Paige.
My mother's voice was honey over broken glass. We need to talk about your grandmother's condition. Her condition. I sat down in the only empty seat, a straight-back chair that faced all four of them directly. She seems fine to me. She's clearly not thinking straight. Diane crossed her legs, her bracelet catching the light, leaving a $2 million property to one grandchild, excluding everyone else. That's not the behavior of a rational woman.
She's not excluding anyone, I said.
She's giving me something she wants me to have. That's her right. Cassandra let out a small theatrical sob. This is so unfair. I've always loved Grandma. I just don't have time to visit like you do. I have a career. I have a life. You have a trust fund and a fiancé with a lake house, I thought. But I did not say it. The fair thing to do, my father spoke for the first time, his voice measured the way attorneys cultivate measured, would be for you to decline the inheritance, or agree to sell the property and split the proceeds equally among family members. I stared at him, Robert Mercer, who had not asked me a single question about my life in years. Robert Mercer, who had missed my college graduation because of a scheduling conflict that turned out to be a golf tournament. That Robert Mercer was now telling me what was fair. And then Brandon, who had no business speaking at all, who was a guest in a family conversation he should have been watching silently, leaned forward and said, in the smooth, practiced tone of a man who had been coached, "Paige, I think your family is just asking you to consider everyone's interests here. That's what a family does." I looked at him for a long moment. He was 27 years old, and his father was a senior partner at Trout and Pepper, and he had never once earned a single thing that hadn't been handed to him, and he was sitting in my father's armchair drinking my father's bourbon and telling me what families do. "I'm not declining anything," I said. "And I'm not selling anything. Grandma made this decision because she wanted to. If you have a problem with it, talk to her." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Diane's smile vanished. "Then I hope you're prepared," she said quietly, "for the consequences of being so selfish." The consequences came swiftly. By summer 2019, I had been quietly removed from the family group chat. I learned about Cassandra's engagement party through an Instagram post. A photo of her surrounded by our cousins, champagne glasses raised at the Waldorf in Buckhead. The caption read, "Future Mrs. Whitmore," with 3 diamond emojis. No one had told me. No one had invited me. When I asked my mother about it, she said, "Oh, we assumed you wouldn't want to come. You've been so busy with your little party planning thing." The worst part was not the exclusion. It was what came with it. The stories Diane began telling anyone who would listen. Paige manipulated my mother. I overheard her say at a neighborhood gathering I had shown up to uninvited, visited her constantly, turned her against the family. You know how vulnerable elderly people can be. She painted me as a predator, a schemer, the ungrateful daughter who had exploited a confused old woman for profit. And through all of it, I never corrected her publicly. I never made a scene. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I kept my head down, eventually the storm would pass. I didn't understand yet that silence was exactly what she was counting on. What I also didn't understand was why Grandma Eleanor had moved into Magnolia Gardens Senior Living in late 2019, a luxury facility in Buckhead that cost $11,000 a month. She told me she wanted peace and quiet. She told me she was tired of the drama. But sometimes when I visited her on Sundays, I caught something in her eyes. A flicker of something that looked almost like fear. And once, only once, when I arrived on a Sunday morning and let myself in with the keys she had given me, I found her at the kitchen table with a folder open in front of her. She closed it the moment she heard me come in. Not quickly enough. I saw my mother's name on the top page. "Grandma," I said, "what is that?" She looked at me for a long moment. Then she closed the folder completely, slid it under a magazine, and said, "How do you take your coffee these days?" I forget. And that was that. I let it go. I shouldn't have. 3 years would pass before I understood what she was hiding and why she had chosen to hide it. December 2021. For months before the wedding that would change everything. I was in my studio on a Friday afternoon reviewing vendor proposals for a spring gala when the mail arrived. Among the invoices and catalogs was an envelope of heavy cream cardstock. My name written in calligraphy so elaborate it took me a moment to read it. Inside was an invitation. Cassandra's wedding. April 19th, 2022. The St. Regis, Atlanta. Black tie. For a full minute, I just stared at it. After 2 years of being treated like a ghost, no holidays, no birthdays, no casual texts, they were inviting me to the wedding.
My phone rang that same evening. Paige,
Darling. Diane's voice was warm, almost affectionate. I hadn't heard that tone since before the inheritance news. Did you receive Cassandra's invitation?
I did.
Wonderful. This wedding is such a beautiful opportunity for our family to heal, to move forward. She paused meaningfully. To show everyone that the Mercers are united. I waited. I've been thinking, she continued. And there it was. The real reason for the call. This would be the perfect time to revisit our conversation about the penthouse. Cassandra and Brandon will need a place to live after the honeymoon. Somewhere appropriate for a young couple starting their life together. I closed my eyes. The invitation was not an olive branch. It was bait. Mom, the penthouse is mine. Grandma left it to me. That hasn't changed. Nothing has to change, sweetheart. You could simply transfer the property as a wedding gift. Think of how generous that would look. Think of how proud Grandma would be. The audacity of it took my breath away. Using my grandmother, the woman who had specifically chosen to give me that apartment, as an argument for why I should give it away. I'm not transferring anything.
Paige.
The warmth evaporated. Cassandra deserves a proper start. She's marrying into the Whitmore family. Do you understand what that means? Brandon's father is a senior partner at Troutman Pepper. They'll be entertaining. They'll be hosting. They need a home that reflects their position. Then Brandon's father can buy them one. Silence. When Diane spoke again, her voice was ice. I expect you to think carefully about this before the wedding. And I expect you to make the right choice. She hung up. I sat in my studio as the winter sun set, casting long shadows across my planning boards. If I went to that wedding and refused again in front of everyone Diane had spent 3 decades impressing, she would make me pay. She would tell every guest that I was the selfish, ungrateful daughter who ruined her sister's special day. She would turn Atlanta's entire social and professional establishment against me. My reputation, my business, my future client referrals, so many of which came from exactly those circles. But if I didn't go, that would be its own kind of surrender. I considered skipping it. I really did. But something in me refused. I had done nothing wrong. I had accepted a gift from someone who loved me. I would not be made to feel like a criminal for it. I RSVP'd yes. 1 week before the wedding, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. Grandma Eleanor. Sweetheart, she said, her voice carrying that urgency I had only heard a handful of times in my life. I need you to listen carefully. I'm listening. If something happens at that wedding, and I believe something will, I want you to call James Calloway immediately. The number is saved under Calloway law. Can you check that it's in your phone? I grabbed my phone. It was there. Grandma, what are you talking about? What's going to happen? Your mother thinks I don't know what she's planning. She forgets that I was teaching contract law before she passed the bar. Eleanor's voice was steady, but I heard the steel beneath it. I've prepared everything. James has all the documents. If you need them, they're ready. Documents? What documents? Just remember the number. And remember, she paused, that I love you. Whatever happens, I love you. She hung up before I could ask anything more. I saved James Calloway's number in my contacts. I did not understand why my hands were shaking. And then I thought about that Sunday morning 3 years ago. My grandmother sliding a folder under a magazine. My mother's name on the top page. The way Eleanor had looked at me for a long moment before she changed the subject. She had been sitting on something for 3 years. Whatever it was finally ready. I wouldn't understand the full weight of it until I walked through the doors of the St. Regis Atlanta and saw what was waiting for me. April 19th, 2022. The St. Regis Atlanta rose above Peachtree Street like a monument to old money and older ambitions. I had coordinated events in that building 3 times in my career. I knew its ballrooms, its lighting rigs, its catering staff by name. Walking through those gilded doors as a guest, as a Mercer, felt entirely different. It felt like walking into enemy territory. The ballroom was breathtaking. White peonies cascaded from crystal chandeliers. A 12-piece jazz ensemble played Cole Porter in the corner. Waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne flutes and canapes on silver trays. Every detail screamed expense and taste and Diane Mercer's personal touch. 250 guests. I counted the chairs during cocktail hour because counting chairs is what I do, it is my job, it is my reflex, and I needed something mechanical to focus on while I scanned the room for threats. Attorneys, surgeons, investment managers, old Atlanta families whose names appeared on hospital wings and university buildings. These were the people my mother had spent 3 decades cultivating. Her audience. Her witnesses. I wore a deep green dress. Elegant, but not attention-seeking. I had debated for hours. Knowing anything too expensive would be called showing off the penthouse money, and anything too plain would embarrass the family. In the end, I chose something that simply felt like me. My father found me near the floral installation 10 minutes after I arrived.
Paige.
Robert nodded, his eyes sliding past me the way they always had. Glad you could make it. We stood in silence. After 30 years, we had nothing left to say. Then he added, quietly, so only I could hear, "Your mother has a plan tonight. Just sign the papers, Paige. It will be easier for everyone." I looked at him. Just sign the papers. That was my father. Not, "I'm sorry this is happening to you." Not, "I disagree with how this is being handled." Just make it easier for everyone. Everyone except me. I said nothing. He drifted away toward the bar. Cassandra appeared in a cloud of ivory silk and crystals, her veil trailing behind her like a promise of the life she had always believed she deserved. She hugged me, arms circling but not quite touching, the way you embrace someone at a networking event you are not sure you will see again. "Paige, you came." Her smile was camera-ready. "Of course. You're my sister." She pulled back. Her expression shifted. Subtle. Calculated. "Did you bring the paperwork?" I blinked. "What paperwork?" "Mom said you'd have the transfer documents ready." Cassandra's voice was light, almost playful, but her eyes were hard. "For the penthouse. Our wedding gift." So this was it. They had already decided among themselves that I would comply. The invitation. The phone call. My father's quiet warning at the floral installation. All of it was a prelude to this moment. The entire evening had been choreographed. "Cassandra, there are no transfer documents." "What do you mean?" "I mean the penthouse is mine. It is not a gift. It is not up for discussion." Her perfect smile flickered. "But Mom said." "I don't know what Mom told you." I kept my voice low, steady. "But I am not signing anything.
Not today.
Not ever." Cassandra's jaw tightened. For a moment, she looked exactly like Diane. "You know, Brandon and I were planning to move in after the honeymoon. We already told our realtor we wouldn't need the condo in Midtown. We already told everyone. You told everyone about an apartment that doesn't belong to you. It should belong to us." Her voice rose slightly. "You don't even need it. You live in that little place in Decatur. You don't entertain. You don't have clients to impress. What is the point of you having a $2 million penthouse? The point? What was the point of me having anything valuable, anything that suggested I might matter as much as she did? I had spent my whole life being asked that question in different ways. "The point," I said quietly, "is that Grandma wanted me to have it. And her wishes matter more than your real estate plans." Cassandra stared at me. Then she leaned in close, her bridal perfume overwhelming. "Mom is going to handle this," she whispered. "And when she does, don't say I didn't warn you." She swept away toward her bridesmaids. I moved toward the bar. But before I could get there, a woman in a cream blazer stepped into my path. I recognized her immediately. Sandra Hollins, one of Diane's closest friends, wife of a federal circuit judge. You're Paige, aren't you? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Diane's mentioned you. I heard you're holding on to some property for your grandmother. That's very responsible of you. Will you be selling it soon? There it was. The narrative Diane had been spinning for years. I wasn't the heir. I was the caretaker, the temporary custodian of assets that would eventually be distributed properly. Actually, I said I live there. Sandra's eyebrows rose.
Oh,
I thought, well, never mind what I thought. She excused herself and disappeared into the crowd. I stood alone in that sea of silk and quiet judgment and understood finally what I was up against. Diane had been preparing this battlefield for years. Every conversation, every social event, every carefully placed comment, all of it was groundwork. My father's whisper at the flowers, Sandra's loaded question at the bar, Cassandra's demand at the entrance. This wasn't a wedding. It was an ambush with a seating chart. And tonight, Diane intended to collect. I escaped to the balcony. The April air was warm, but the height gave it a bite. After the suffocating warmth of the ballroom, I welcomed it. I leaned against the stone railing, looking out over Peachtree Street, trying to slow my racing heartbeat. That's when my phone buzzed. Grandma Eleanor. I answered immediately. Hello, my dear girl.
her voice was calm.
Almost too calm.
Tell me what's happening.
How do you know something's happening? Because I know my daughter. A pause. Diane has been planning something for weeks. Making phone calls. Gathering people. Building her case. She thinks I don't know because I'm tucked away in my facility. She forgets I have friends who actually like me. She had my father warn me at the door, I said. She positioned Sandra Hollins at the bar. She had Cassandra ask me for transfer documents before the cocktail hour ended. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "She's more organized than I gave her credit for." Her voice was not afraid. It was almost admiring in the cold way you admired a machine. It doesn't matter. James has everything. Whatever she's built tonight, I built something stronger 3 years ago. What is it? What has she done? 6 months ago, Eleanor finally said, "Your friend Marcus came to visit me." Marcus Cole. We had been friends since freshman year at Georgia Tech. He was an investigative journalist, now at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He had mentioned months back that he was looking into irregular real estate transactions in the metro area, but I hadn't connected it to anything in my life. He came to visit you.
Why?
Because he found something. A property sale in 2018. A house in Savannah that belonged to me. A house I never sold. My breath caught. What do you mean you never sold it?
I mean exactly that.
Your mother sold it for $850,000. She forged my signature on the documents. The world tilted. I gripped the railing. Grandma, I didn't want to believe it either. That's why I hired experts. A firm called Meridian Forensic Document Services here in Atlanta. They analyzed the signatures. The probability of forgery was 98.7%. 98.7. That wasn't doubt. That was certainty. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you go to the police? Because she's my daughter. Eleanor's voice cracked just slightly before she studied it. Because I hope there might be some explanation. Some reason that isn't what it looks like. But we both knew there wasn't. That's why you moved to Magnolia Gardens, I said. Not for peace and quiet. Because you couldn't trust her. And that folder, the morning I came early and you slid it under the magazine, that was the Savannah documents. A silence. You saw that, she said softly. I saw your name on the top page. I saw her name below it.
I didn't know what it meant then.
I know, Paige. I'm sorry. I wasn't ready. Eleanor's voice was steady again. I couldn't trust her, and I couldn't prove anything without destroying everything. So I removed myself. I protected what I could protect, the penthouse, my remaining assets, and I waited. For what? For Diane to make a mistake. Eleanor's voice hardened. Tonight might be that mistake. If she pushes too far in front of her audience, James has everything he needs. The forensic report, the original transaction records, witnesses who can confirm where I was during the time I supposedly signed those papers. Where were you? Piedmont Hospital. 6 weeks. A broken hip. I signed nothing. I authorized nothing. I closed my eyes, absorbing the full weight of it. My mother hadn't just manipulated me. She had stolen from her own mother. She had committed fraud. And she had let Grandma Eleanor carry the label of confused and irrational while she quietly bled her dry.
Paige.
Eleanor's voice pulled me back. I'm not telling you this to make you hate her. I'm telling you because you need to understand what you're dealing with. And you need to know that if she corners you tonight, you are not alone. You have never been alone. The jazz band started up again inside. A Gershwin standard that felt grotesquely cheerful given everything I had just learned. What do you want me to do? Don't sign anything. And if it goes badly, if she pushes you beyond what you can bear, call James. Tell him the documents are needed. He'll know what to do. And Paige, she paused. When James calls me, I'll be there within the hour. I've been waiting 3 years for this, darling. I'm not going to miss it. She hung up. I stood on that balcony in the warm Atlanta night, the city spread out below me, Peachtree Street glittering 20 floors down. I thought about a Sunday morning 3 years ago and a folder sliding under a magazine and an old woman looking at me with eyes that were carrying something enormous and choosing, not yet, not yet. She had been waiting 3 years for the right moment. Tonight was the moment. I straightened my shoulders, smoothed my dress, and walked back into the ballroom. I'm going to pause here for a moment, because I know some of you watching this have been in situations like mine, surrounded by people who are supposed to love you, but instead they make you feel small, invisible, like your needs are an inconvenience and your accomplishments are a hobby. If this is hitting close to home, tell me in the comments. Should I have walked out right then? Or was I right to stay and face what was coming? Your answers matter to me more than you know. Now let me tell you what happened next. 7:30 in the evening. Dinner had been served and cleared.
The toasts had been made.
Robert Stiff, perfunctory speech about legacy and new beginnings. Brandon's father waxing poetic about the union of two great Atlanta families. Cassandra's maid of honor telling a sorority story that made everyone laugh politely. I sat at table 18 near the back with a collection of distant cousins and family acquaintances who seemed mildly unsure why I was there. Fine by me. I wanted to be invisible. But Diane Mercer had other plans. The clink of crystal cut through the room's chatter. My mother stood at the head table. Champagne flute in one hand, microphone in the other. Her smile was radiant. Her gown shimmered under the chandeliers. If I could have everyone's attention, she said, I'd like to take a moment for something very special. A family tradition that Cassandra has asked me to facilitate. I felt the first prickle of cold at the base of my spine. As many of you know, the Mercer family believes in taking care of each other. We support each other. We make sacrifices for each other. Diane's eyes swept the room, landing briefly on me before moving on. And tonight, in the spirit of that love, I'd like to invite my eldest daughter, Paige, to join me up here. 250 pairs of eyes turned toward table 18. I didn't move. Paige, sweetheart. Diane's voice was gentle, encouraging, a perfect performance. Come on up, honey.
Don't be shy.
What choice did I have? If I refused, I was the difficult one. The ungrateful one. The sister who ruined Cassandra's wedding with her stubbornness. I stood. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else as I walked through the maze of tables, past the whispered comments and the curious stares, up to the raised platform where my mother waited with her serpent smile. There she is. Diane put an arm around my shoulders. Affection for the audience. A grip of control for me. Now, everyone, Paige has been holding on to something very precious. Our mother, my mother, left her a beautiful penthouse apartment in Midtown Atlanta. $2.1 million in value. Quite an inheritance. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Paige has been keeping it safe, Diane continued, waiting for just the right moment to share it with the family. And what better moment than her sister's wedding day? She produced a folder. I hadn't even seen her holding it. She opened it to reveal a thick stack of legal documents. Transfer of deed. Quitclaim agreement. My name already typed in the signature lines. All Paige needs to do is sign. And this incredible gift will help Cassandra and Brandon start their marriage in a home that truly reflects their future. The room applauded. They actually applauded. Like this was a heartwarming moment. Like I was about to perform an act of sisterly love rather than be publicly coerced into surrendering my inheritance in front of 250 witnesses my mother had spent 30 years collecting for exactly this purpose.
Mom.
My voice was quiet but steady. I'm not signing this. Diane's smile didn't waver. Don't be nervous, sweetheart. It's just paperwork. It's not just paperwork. It's the apartment Grandma Eleanor left to me. Not to Cassandra.
Not to the family. To me.
The applause died. The silence that replaced it was enormous.
Paige.
Diane's grip on my shoulder tightened. Her voice dropped, but the microphone still carried it. Let's not make this difficult. I'm not making it anything. I'm telling you no. Cassandra appeared at the edge of the platform, her face a mask of wounded innocence. Paige, you're really going to do this on my wedding day? Cassandra, I didn't ask to be called up here. I didn't ask to be put on display. We did this because we knew you'd be selfish. Cassandra's voice cracked. We knew you'd choose that apartment over your own family. The apartment isn't stupid when you want to live in it. Brandon's father coughed uncomfortably from the head table. A waiter near the kitchen entrance stood frozen, tray suspended in midair. This was not the elegant evening anyone had envisioned. Diane's composure cracked. Her face reddened. Her voice rose. You ungrateful child. The microphone amplified every syllable to every corner of that room. After everything we've done for you, after we raised you, educated you, supported your little business, you can't do this one thing for your sister. You didn't support my business. You have never once been to my studio. And you didn't raise me, Grandma did, every summer while you were at conferences and galas and anywhere else that wasn't home. Gasps scattered through the room. I had said too much. I knew it, but I couldn't stop. The penthouse is mine because Grandma wanted me to have it, because I was there, because I cared. And no amount of public humiliation is going to change that. Diane's hand moved so fast I didn't see it coming. The slap connected with my left cheek hard enough to snap my head sideways. My earring, the pearl drops Grandma Eleanor had given me for my 30th birthday, flew off my ear and bounced across the marble floor with a sound like a small bell. The room went absolutely silent. 250 people holding their breath at once is a sound you feel in your chest before you hear it. I stood perfectly still. My cheek burned. My vision blurred at the edges. Somewhere in the crowd, someone made a sound that was not quite a gasp and not quite a word. What I did was breathe. I bent down. I picked up the earring. It was slightly bent but not broken. I straightened it carefully, methodically, and put it back on my ear. Then I looked at my mother. That's the last time you touch me, I said. My voice did not shake. I was proud of that. I turned and walked off the platform, through the tables, past the whispers and the stares and the jazz band that had stopped mid-note, past Sandra Hollins, who was looking at her champagne glass like she wished she were somewhere else, past my father, who was standing near the edge of the room with his hands in his pockets and an expression I had never seen on his face before, something that looked almost like shame. I did not stop for him. Out through the double doors of the ballroom and into the lobby. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I found a quiet corner near the concierge desk, pulled out my phone, and dialed the number I had saved a week ago. It rang once. Callaway Law. This is Paige Mercer, I said.
My voice was calm, steady, certain.
Please tell my grandmother the documents are needed. Understood, Miss Mercer. She'll be there within the hour. I hung up. I sat down on a velvet bench. I touched my stinging cheek. And I waited. 1 hour. That was all I needed. 8:45 in the evening. The main doors of the St. Regis Atlanta opened, and my grandmother walked in. Eleanor Mercer was 76 years old. She moved with a cane now, her pace slower than I remembered from my childhood. But everything else about her radiated the same formidable presence that had made her one of the most respected legal minds at Emory University for nearly 3 decades. She wore a charcoal cashmere coat over a simple black dress. Her silver hair was pinned back elegantly. And beside her walked James Calloway, mid-40s, wire-rimmed glasses, a charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it contained the weight of the world. Behind them, and this I had not expected, walked Marcus Cole, my friend, the journalist, the man who had found the Savannah property records 6 months ago and driven to Magnolia Gardens to sit across from a 76-year-old woman and tell her what he had found. He was wearing a jacket over a dress shirt, and he looked slightly underdressed for the St. Regis Atlanta and completely unbothered by that fact. He caught my eye across the lobby and gave me a small nod. He had come to witness.
Grandma.
I stood up, and for a moment my composure broke entirely. You came. She crossed the lobby and took my face in both hands, examining my cheek with eyes that missed nothing. Her thumbs were gentle. Her expression was not.
She hit you.
It was not a question.
Yes.
Eleanor's jaw tightened in a way I had not seen since she was still in a lecture hall dressing down a student who had cited a case incorrectly. She looked at my cheek for a long moment. Then she kissed my forehead, gently, deliberately, the way she had when I was 9 years old and had fallen off my bicycle in her driveway and was trying very hard not to cry. Then let's finish this, she said. We walked into the ballroom together. The 4 of us. Me, Eleanor, James, Marcus. The wedding was in chaos. Clusters of guests stood in tight, urgent conversation, their champagne forgotten and warming in their hands. Cassandra was at the far end of the room near the floral wall, actually crying this time. Not the performance from the stage, something rawer and more confused, while Brandon stood beside her with his hand on her back and his eyes moving around the room with the calculating speed of a man doing damage assessment. His parents sat at the head table, rigid and silent, the posture of people who have decided to wait before they decide what they think. Diane stood near the center of the room, gesturing emphatically at Robert, her voice low and sharp. Robert had his hands raised slightly, palms out, the universal gesture of a man trying to slow something down that has already left the station. Sandra Hollins was nowhere to be seen. 3 of the attorneys I had clocked during cocktail hour were huddled near the bar in the way that attorneys huddle when they are no longer at a social event and have shifted involuntarily into professional mode. No one noticed us at first. Then someone near the entrance looked up. Then someone else. The reaction moved through the room the way a current moves through water. Not a wave, just a change in direction. A pull, people turning without entirely knowing why they were turning. And then Diane turned and saw her mother walking toward her across the marble floor.
Mom.
The word came out strangled, like something she had been rehearsing not to say, and it came out anyway. Diane's face went the specific white of a person whose entire plan has just walked through a door it was not supposed to be able to open. What are you? How did you? I'm here for my granddaughter's wedding, Eleanor said. Her voice carried across the suddenly silent room with the unhurried authority of a woman who had spent nearly 3 decades commanding lecture halls full of first-year law students who thought they already knew everything. No microphone needed. 250 people went quiet for it anyway. I wasn't invited, of course. Eleanor continued, looking around the room with the calm expression of someone who has arrived exactly on schedule. But I decided to come anyway. I hope the bride doesn't mind. Cassandra, mascara tracking silently down both cheeks, stared at her grandmother from across the room and said nothing. What is this? Diane's voice rose. What are you doing here? This is a private event, and you are not. I'm doing what I should have done 3 years ago. Eleanor stopped approximately 10 feet from her daughter, close enough for every person in that room to hear every word without straining. She turned to face the assembled guests, 250 people, a significant percentage of them attorneys, judges, and professionals who understood exactly what the presence of a lawyer with a briefcase at a wedding reception meant. My name is Eleanor Mercer. I was a professor of law at Emory University for 28 years. I am 76 years old. I am of completely sound mind. And I am here to confirm, on the record, in front of every witness in this room, that the penthouse at 240 Peachtree Tower, the property my daughter just publicly demanded my granddaughter surrender on a stage with a microphone, was left to Paige Mercer in my will, dated March 4th, 2019. That will is legal. It is valid. It is enforceable. And there are no other claims to that property. James Calloway opened his briefcase. The sound of those clasps snapping open in that silent room was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. He withdrew a document and held it up so the room could see the official seal. This is a certified copy of Mrs. Mercer's will, notarized and filed with the Fulton County Probate Court. I have been her attorney for 23 years. I prepared this document personally. I can attest completely and without reservation to its authenticity. Diane's face contorted. This is absurd. She took a step forward. Mother, you're confused. You've been confused for months. Everyone who knows you has noticed, and someone has clearly taken advantage of. I understand perfectly, Eleanor said. Her voice was ice on a still morning. What you don't understand is that I've been watching you for 3 years. Quietly.
Carefully.
The way you taught me to watch you, actually, because you learned that from somewhere.
She nodded to James.
He withdrew a second set of documents. These are transaction records for a property in Savannah, Georgia. A house on Tybee Road that was deeded in my name from 1987 until September 3rd, 2018, when it was sold for $850,000. The room went completely still. I could hear the ice melting in the abandoned champagne buckets. I could hear the jazz ensemble shifting in their seats. I could hear Cassandra breathing. I did not sell that property, Eleanor said. Her voice was clear and absolute. I could not have sold that property. In September of 2018, I was a patient at Piedmont Hospital for 6 weeks recovering from a broken hip. I was on medication. I had restricted mobility. I signed nothing. I authorized nothing. I was not contacted by any realtor, any attorney, or any title company in connection with that sale. Diane's mouth opened. No sound came out. James produced a third document. This is a forensic analysis report from Meridian Forensic Document Services, a certified firm based here in Atlanta specializing in question document examination. He turned slightly so that the attorneys near the bar could see him clearly, his voice carrying the measured weight of a man who has stood in courtrooms. They examined the signature appearing on the Savannah closing documents against 30 years of authenticated samples of Mrs. Mercer's handwriting, deeds, legal filings, correspondence, professional publications. Their conclusion is this: the signature on the closing documents is inconsistent with Mrs. Mercer's authentic hand. The probability of forgery is 98.7%. The murmur that went through the ballroom then was unlike anything I had ever heard in an event space in my professional life. I have managed charity galas where donors announced 7-figure gifts. I have coordinated corporate events where CEOs made announcements that moved stock prices. I have never heard a room full of 250 people make that particular sound. The sound of an entire social class simultaneously recalibrating everything they thought they understood about a family they had known for 30 years. Brandon's father, senior partner at Troutman Pepper, pushed his chair back slightly from the head table. A small gesture, a distancing gesture, the kind attorneys make when they are no longer willing to be physically associated with something. You're lying. Diane's voice cracked down the middle. She pointed at Eleanor, her hand not quite steady. This is fabricated. All of it. You're senile. You've been senile for 2 years, and someone has put you up to this because they want to destroy this family and destroy my daughter's wedding and I'm sharp enough to hire experts, Eleanor replied simply. I'm sharp enough to have preserved every piece of original documentation going back to 1987. I'm sharp enough to have built a complete evidentiary file over 18 months. And I'm sharp enough to have forwarded that entire file to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office 4 days ago. The color left Diane's face completely. Not faded. Left. Like something had been switched off behind her eyes.
She said. You didn't.
Forgery, Eleanor said.
And fraud.
Under Georgia law, that carries up to 10 years. She said it the way she used to explain penalty clauses to first-year students. Not cruelly. Almost gently. The gentleness of someone delivering a fact that has always been true and will remain true regardless of how anyone in the room feels about it. I didn't want to believe my own daughter was capable of this. Her voice was steady, but I heard what was underneath it. The 3 years of it, the Sundays of it, the folder she had slid under a magazine on a quiet morning when she wasn't ready yet. I gave you time to come to me, time to confess, time to make it right before it came to this. Instead, you spent those 3 years telling everyone who would listen that I was confused and irrational. You tried to steal my granddaughter's inheritance the same way you stole my property. And tonight you stood on a stage with a microphone and a stack of documents, and you hit her in front of 250 people because she wouldn't let you finish the job. She stopped. That is who you chose to be. I didn't make that choice.
You did.
Diane spun toward Robert. Robert. Her voice was raw now, the performance entirely gone, something underneath it that might have been fear and might have been fury, and was probably both.
Say something. Tell them.
Tell them this is insane. Tell them she's confused. Tell them. Robert Mercer, who had stood silently in the background of every scene in the story, who had whispered, "Just sign the papers" at the floral installation, who had spent 30 years choosing not to know, took one visible, deliberate step backward. I didn't know about the Savannah house, he said. His voice was flat, empty of everything. You signed the transfer, Diane said. Her voice cracked. You were there. You were standing right there. I signed what you put in front of me. His jaw was tight. I didn't read it. I never read anything you put in front of me, and I have been telling myself for 30 years that that was trust. He looked at her. It wasn't trust. It was cowardice. And I'm done with both. The room watched 35 years of marriage come apart in approximately 45 seconds. Cassandra finally moved. She crossed from the far end of the room, past the floral wall, past the tables of stunned cousins and frozen caterers, until she was standing at the edge of the small clear space that had opened around her mother the way space opens around something people have decided they do not want to be too close to. Her veil was slightly askew. Her mascara was gone entirely. She looked younger without the wedding performance on her face. She looked like my sister, actually. The real one, underneath everything.
Mom, she said.
Her voice was very small. What is Grandma talking about? Diane didn't answer. She was looking at Eleanor. Only at Eleanor. Like no one else in the room existed. And Eleanor looked back at her. It was the look of a woman who had loved her daughter for 51 years and had spent 3 of them understanding who that daughter actually was and had arrived tonight not in anger, but in the specific grief of a person who has exhausted every other option. You lost me the day I discovered what you'd done, Eleanor said. Her voice was quiet now, private almost in that enormous silent room. Tonight, everyone else simply got to see the truth. She paused. I hope someday you find it in yourself to take responsibility for it. Not for my sake. For yours. She turned toward the exit. I walked beside her. Behind us, it started slowly, and then all at once. Diane's voice, rising past anything I had heard from her before, incoherent fragments, denials, demands that someone do something, accusations that Eleanor had been coached, that I had orchestrated this, that Marcus Cole had fabricated the forensic report, that James Calloway had forged the DA referral documents, that the entire evening was a conspiracy against her family. Brandon's mother said something sharp and final to Cassandra in a voice I could not hear, but whose tone was unmistakable. 3 of the attorneys left the bar area and moved toward the exit in a cluster, not running, just done. Someone at a back table started crying. Not Cassandra, one of the cousins, I think, the sound confused and young. The jazz ensemble sat motionless with their instruments in their laps. I did not look back. Not once. We made it to the lobby. Eleanor was walking steadily, her cane clicking on the marble, her posture straight. Marcus walked slightly behind us, quiet, giving us space. James was already on his phone. I heard the footsteps before I heard the voice.
Quick. Sharp.
Expensive shoes on marble. Brandon. Mrs. Mercer. He addressed Eleanor directly.
Did not look at me.
Did not look at Marcus. The practiced focus of a man who has decided which person in a room has the most power and is going directly for them. I think there are some things here that could be resolved quietly. He kept his voice low and smooth. Family matters have a way of getting complicated. Emotions run high. If we could just sit down with the right people in the room, I think we could find a path forward that works for everyone. Eleanor regarded him with an expression I recognized from the one time I had attended one of her guest lectures at Emory, 8 years ago. A student in the front row had tried to argue that a contract clause meant something it plainly did not mean. She had looked at him exactly this way. There is nothing to resolve, Mr. Whitmore. Brandon's smooth exterior developed a hairline crack. But the penthouse, the asset itself, surely there's a conversation to be had. Given everything tonight, given that this is my wedding day, and my wife is, your wife, Eleanor said calmly, knew exactly what was planned for tonight. She asked Paige for the transfer documents before cocktail hour was finished. She stood on that stage. She participated in every part of this. Whatever she is experiencing right now is the consequence of those choices, not mine. Brandon's jaw tightened. I watched him recalibrate. Watched him decide to try a different angle. What about the will itself? He kept his voice reasonable. Given the circumstances, the investigation, the family situation, it seems like the kind of thing a reasonable person might want to revisit. Out of fairness. Out of a desire to do right by everyone. Eleanor smiled. It was the smile I had seen in that lecture hall 8 years ago. After the student in the front row had pushed his incorrect argument one step too far. Mr. Whitmore. Her voice was pleasant. I'm not revisiting anything. The penthouse belongs to Paige. It will continue to belong to Paige. I am 76 years old, and I have been a professor of law for 28 years, and I have met a great many men in my life who believed that persistence in the face of a clear answer was a negotiating strategy rather than an embarrassment. She looked at him steadily. You married the wrong Mercer. And frankly, given what I have watched you do in this lobby tonight, on your wedding night, in front of your wife's grandmother, Cassandra is welcome to you. Brandon's face went through several things at once. He turned toward James. James Calloway stepped forward quietly, placing himself between Brandon and Eleanor with the practiced ease of a man who had been doing this for 23 years. Mr. Whitmore. James's voice was pleasant and final. I would strongly recommend returning to the reception. Anything further you say tonight could be relevant to ongoing proceedings. That's not a threat. It's professional courtesy. Brandon Whitmore stood in the lobby of the St. Regis Atlanta on his wedding night and understood, in real time, that he had run out of moves. He retreated without another word. Marcus watched him go, pulled out his notebook, and wrote something down. He caught me looking. Force of habit, he said quietly. We stepped out through the main doors into the April night. The air hit me immediately, warm and jasmine-scented with the specific undertone of rain that Atlanta gets in spring, the smell of something about to break open. The streetlights cast gold across the Peachtree Street sidewalks. Somewhere down the block a car horn and the distant pulse of another building's music. Grandma, I said. She turned. I'm sorry about the wedding, about the scene, about all of it. She patted my arm firmly.
Don't be sorry.
She looked at me with clear, direct eyes. I've been waiting 3 years to say those things out loud. It felt like setting down something very heavy that I should have set down a long time ago. I almost laughed. It came out raw and real and completely unpolished, and I didn't try to stop it. What happens now? James answered in his even, professional way. The district attorney's office will proceed with the investigation. Mrs. Mercer has provided a complete evidentiary file. Whether charges are ultimately filed will depend on their review process, but the documentation is thorough. The forensic report alone is significant. And Diane? Eleanor's face did something complicated. Something that was grief and resolution in equal measure, and I could not have told you which was greater.
That's up to the courts now, she said.
I've done what I was able to do. The rest belongs to other people. A pause. I thought about her for a long time, Paige. What to do?
How to handle it?
She looked out at the street. I kept coming back to the same thing. Some lies cannot be permitted to simply continue. Not because of the money. Not even because of the property. Because of what it means to let them continue. What it teaches.
What it costs the people they land on.
She looked back at me. There is no cruelty in telling the truth. There is only clarity. And sometimes clarity is the only gift you have left to give. Marcus touched my arm.
Hey.
His voice was quiet just for me. You did good in there. I didn't do anything, I said. I just waited.
He looked at me.
Sometimes that's the whole job. James's car arrived at the curb. He held the door for Eleanor. Come visit tomorrow, she said, turning to me as she moved toward the car. I want to hear about the business. Not the version you give people at networking events. The real one. The numbers. The clients you're proud of. The ones who drove you crazy. All of it.
I'll be there, I said.
She hugged me. Not briefly. Not with the careful performance of affection I had received on that stage. A real hug, the kind that has years in it, history in it, the accumulated weight of 10 years of Sunday visits and tulips and iced tea, and sitting together when there was nothing interesting to say. I held on. I love you, my sweet girl, she murmured. I love you too, Grandma. She climbed into the car. James got in beside her.
The door closed.
I watched the car pull away from the curb and move down Peachtree Street and disappear around the corner. Marcus stood beside me on the sidewalk with his hands in his jacket pockets. I should go file something, he said, before someone else does. Thank you, I told him, for finding it, for going to her. He shook his head. She already knew. I just gave her the confirmation she needed to be certain. She was always going to do something about it. He paused. She was waiting for someone to help her be sure. He nodded once and walked toward the parking structure. I stood alone on the sidewalk outside the St. Regis Atlanta. My cheek had stopped burning. The earring was back on my ear, slightly bent, holding. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Paige, this is Jennifer Hartwell from Hartwell Events Group. I was at the wedding tonight. I owe you an apology, and I mean that sincerely. I believed things about you that I should have questioned. If you're ever open to a conversation about the Peach State Gala contract, please call me. I understand if you're not, but I wanted to say it either way. I stared at the screen. Jennifer Hartwell. She had been at Sandra Holland's elbow during cocktail hour. One of the women who had nodded along. Now, standing on the other side of it. I saved the number. My phone buzzed again. Marcus. Just saw the AJC legal desk post something. It's already moving. I put my phone in my bag, pulled my wrap tighter, and walked toward the parking garage in the warm Atlanta night. And for the first time in 3 years, I could breathe all the way down. The fallout was swift, and it was quiet, and it was total. 2 weeks after the wedding, Diane Mercer was summoned to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for a formal interview regarding the Savannah property transaction. The interview lasted 4.5 hours. James heard through professional channels that she arrived with an attorney and left looking like someone who had just fully understood for the first time the difference between a negotiation and an investigation. Her attorney, a colleague of Robert's who had agreed to represent her as a favor, withdrew from the case within the week. He cited a conflict of interest. The real reason, I was told later by someone who knew him, was that he had reviewed the forensic report and the hospital records and the chain of documentation and had concluded that the evidence was not the kind you argue against. It was the kind you manage the consequences of. Robert moved out on May 2nd. He checked into the Four Seasons because even in crisis, Robert Mercer maintained the appearance of a man in control of his circumstances. He issued a statement through a mutual friend saying he had no prior knowledge of any fraudulent transactions and was cooperating fully with authorities. His signature was on the transfer documents. Whether anyone believed him depended on how generously they interpreted the phrase "chose not to know," and in my experience, Atlanta's legal community is not particularly generous with that interpretation. Cassandra and Brandon canceled the honeymoon. Brandon's parents had retained their own attorney by the Monday after the wedding, not to defend anyone, but to establish clearly and formally that the Whitmore family had no prior knowledge of the Savannah transaction, no involvement in the property transfer scheme, and no liability in connection with any ongoing investigation. Their attorney filed the appropriate statements. Brandon said nothing publicly. Cassandra said nothing at all. The social consequences moved the way social consequences move in a city like Atlanta, not in announcements, in absences. Diane's name disappeared from the committee list for the Atlanta Philanthropy Council's annual gala in early May. No statement. No explanation. Just gone, replaced by another name, the way a plaque gets replaced when a building changes hands. The Georgia Bar Association opened an ethics inquiry. 3 attorneys who had been present at the wedding filed separate complaints. The inquiry was described in official correspondence as active and ongoing. On May 11th, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's legal affairs column ran a brief item. Atlanta area attorney under investigation for alleged document fraud in connection with a 2018 Savannah real estate transaction. Fulton County DA's office confirmed the investigation is active. No names were published. In Atlanta's legal community, no names were necessary. By noon the same day, I had received texts from 7 people I had not heard from in over 2 years. I answered 3 of them. The message that mattered came from Jennifer Hartwell, a formal email 4 days after her first text. Subject line, an apology and a professional inquiry. She wrote 3 paragraphs. The first was a genuine and specific apology, not the kind that explains itself or asks for anything, just the kind that acknowledges what happened and who did what. The second described the Peach State Gala contract. Full event coordination, 530 guests, budget of $97,000, timeline of 4 months. The third said she understood completely if I wanted no part of anything connected to Diane's social circle and that she would not hold it against me. I sat with that email for 4 days. Part of me wanted nothing to do with any of it. Part of me understood that Jennifer Hartwell was not Diane. She was someone who had been handed a false story for 3 years and had believed it, and who was now trying to make it right in the only concrete way available to her. I took the meeting. The Peach State Gala was the largest contract my studio had ever signed. It was the kind of project that changes what your business can say it has done. When it ran for months later, without a single significant problem, 3 of the guests asked for my card before the evening was over. Word was moving, not just about what had happened to Diane, but about me, about Mercer and Company. About the woman who had stood on that stage and said no into a live microphone and walked off without breaking. People who had dismissed me for 3 years as the Mercer daughter with a party planning hobby were suddenly curious about the Mercer daughter who had planned 3 events at the St. Regis Atlanta and could coordinate a 500-person gala without losing her composure. I vetted every new client carefully. I turned down 2. One wanted to gossip. One felt wrong in a way I had learned to trust. But slowly, steadily, I rebuilt, not just the studio, but something harder to name and more important. My own clear understanding of what I was and what I had always been capable of and what I was no longer willing to pretend I wasn't. In early May, I received a certified letter from a real estate attorney in Savannah. The 2018 sale of Eleanor's Tybee Road property was under formal legal review. The current owners had been notified of potential title defects. James explained it to me over the phone in his unhurried way. If the original sale was voided on the grounds of fraud, the property could revert to Eleanor's estate. The buyers would likely have claims against Diane for the purchase price. It would take time, possibly years. But the wheel was turning. Diane Mercer, who had spent 51 years accumulating status and property and social capital and the goodwill of every important person in Atlanta's professional establishment, was watching all of it move in one direction, away from her. I will not pretend I felt nothing about that. I felt something. I sat with it honestly. And then I set it down because carrying it would have required continuing to make her the center of my life, and she had been the center of my life for long enough. June 2022, 2 months after the wedding. I am sitting on the balcony of my penthouse. The sun is setting over Atlanta, and the city below me is doing what Atlanta does at this hour, catching fire in the glass towers, throwing light across Peachtree Street, the distant interstate a slow red pulse at the edge of the skyline. The kind of evening my grandmother has always called a big sky evening. The kind where the light does something that makes you feel like the city is performing for you specifically. She is here. Eleanor comes every Sunday now. I pick her up from Magnolia Gardens at 10 in the morning, the same time I have been showing up at her door for 10 years, and we spend the day together. Sometimes the High Museum, sometimes Piedmont Park, sometimes the DeKalb Farmers Market because she has always loved it and I have always pretended to find it tedious and have never actually found it tedious. Today we walked through the market in the morning and came back here in the afternoon, and now we are on the balcony with wine watching the Sunday sunset over Atlanta. Today we have been talking about my father. He called me, I tell her. Thursday. He wanted to explain, to give me his side of it. Eleanor raises an eyebrow and holds her wine glass and waits. He says he didn't know about the Savannah house, that Diane handled everything, and he just signed where she told him to sign. He says he's been thinking about what he said at the wedding, about waiting 30 years, and he thinks he owes me more than a statement through a mutual friend. Do you believe him? I think about it. Actually think, not just reflexively. I believe he didn't know specifically about the Savannah house. I finally say, I believe he signed what she put in front of him and didn't ask what it was. I believe he's been doing that for 30 years across a lot of different situations. I pause. I don't think not knowing is the same as being innocent. I think not asking is a choice. He made that choice over and over for decades. Eleanor is quiet for a moment. And what did you tell him? I told him I needed time, that I wasn't ready to see him yet, that if he wanted a relationship with me going forward, the way to build that was not through a phone call explaining himself, but through consistent, actual presence over time. Showing up, not for occasions. Just regularly, the way you do when someone actually matters to you. She squeezes my hand. That's the right answer. We sit for a while. The light shifts. The towers go from gold to amber. Cassandra texted me, I say. Eleanor doesn't react immediately. She takes a sip of wine and looks at the skyline. She wants to talk. She says she's been thinking about a lot of things. She says she's sorry. And will you call her? I look out at the city. The honest answer is, I don't know yet. I think about my sister, the real version, not the wedding performance. The girl underneath the ivory silk and the camera-ready smile. The one who had shown up on our grandmother's porch exactly twice in 2 years while I showed up every Sunday. The one who had stood on that stage. The one who had stood at the edge of the cleared space around her mother afterward and said what is grandma talking about in a voice that was small and broken and, I believed, genuinely confused. She didn't know about the Savannah house, I say finally. I'm almost certain of that. But she knew about the manipulation. She knew about the pressure. She was in that living room in Buckhead the day they all sat across from me like a tribunal. She let Brandon speak when he had no business speaking. She asked me for the transfer documents before cocktail hour was over. Eleanor nods. She was a participant. Not the architect, but a participant. And for 3 years, she never once called me. Never once asked what actually happened. Never once questioned what she was being told. That's true. If she wants to be my sister, actually be my sister, not perform the role when it's convenient, she has to want to know the truth. The whole truth. About our mother. About what she chose to do and what she chose not to do. I don't think she's there yet. I pause. I'm leaving the door unlocked, but I'm not standing in the doorway waving her in. Eleanor sets her glass down. She looks at me for a long moment.
You've learned something, she says.
Something I should have learned 30 years earlier than I did. What's that? That the people who love you correctly don't require you to be smaller to do it. She reaches over, takes my hand. You deserve to be loved at your full size, Paige. Not the version that's easy to overlook. I started therapy in May. My therapist is Dr. Carolyn Bridges. She works out of a small office in Virginia Highland, second floor, plants in every window, the sound of Ponce de Leon traffic just barely audible through the glass. She specializes in family systems, in the particular damage done by families that organize themselves around one person's needs at the cost of everyone else's reality. Every Tuesday at 4, I sit in that office and say things I spent 30 years finding reasons not to say. Some weeks it is difficult. Some weeks I leave feeling lighter than I arrived. Some weeks I leave and sit in my car for 10 minutes before I can drive. All of those weeks are worth it. There is something else. His name is David. He is an architect I met at a design conference in June. He has kind eyes and appalling spatial memory for someone whose profession involves space, and he has no idea who the Mercers of Buckhead are, which was more attractive to me than I expected it to be. He likes me for my work and my laugh and what he calls my completely unhealthy relationship with event logistics, by which he means my habit of walking into any gathering and immediately assessing the venue's layout for flow and exit placement. It is new. It is slow. It is the first relationship I have been in where I have not spent the first month waiting for the moment when my family becomes the problem. My grandmother finishes her wine. She sets the glass down with a precise, satisfied sound of someone who has been drinking wine long enough to know exactly how to set a glass down. You know, she says, I've been thinking about what I want the end of my life to mean. I start to say something, and she shakes her head once. Not the property, not the legal work, not the cases or the students or the publications. She looks out at the Atlanta skyline. I mean, what I want to have mattered. I wait. I spent too many years choosing the path that caused less immediate disruption. She says it plainly, without self-pity. When Diane was young, and I saw the things she was capable of, I told myself it would get better. When she was older, and I saw what she was doing, I told myself there was still time. When I found out about Savannah, I told myself I needed more evidence, more certainty, more of something. She looks at me. I was waiting for a moment that was never going to arrive on its own. You understand that now, I think. I do. I don't want that for you. She squeezes my hand once, firmly. I want you to say the true thing when it matters. I want you to protect yourself without apologizing for it. I want you to understand that kindness and silence are not the same thing and have never been the same thing. She pauses. And I want you to know, she looks at me steadily, clearly, with the full force of 28 years of teaching and 76 years of living, that every Sunday you showed up at my door for 10 years, you were doing something that mattered. Not because it led to the penthouse. The penthouse is just an address. You showed up, she says, because I mattered to you. And that is the thing I want to have been true about my life, that I mattered to someone who showed up. I feel tears before I expect to. I'll remember, I tell her. Good. She releases my hand and sits back.
Now.
What are we having for dinner? All of this has made me very hungry, and you know I can't eat sentimentality. I laugh. It comes out completely unguarded, the kind of laugh that surprises you, and it goes out over the balcony and over Atlanta, and I don't try to hold any of it back. This is my life now. A penthouse that is legally, entirely, genuinely mine. Not pending. Not in dispute.
Mine.
A grandmother who comes every Sunday and argues with me about whether the DeKalb Farmers Market is worth the parking situation, which it always is. A business that is growing past the edges of what I let myself imagine when I was sitting in a studio in Decatur being described to strangers as a little party planning thing. A therapist I see every Tuesday. A man named David who gets lost between the lobby and the elevator in buildings he has been to 3 times. Boundaries that are mine. Clear and firm and not up for renegotiation. A future I am building. One honest choice at a time. If you are watching this, and somewhere in this story you recognized yourself, if you are the one in your family who shows up on the Sundays nobody else shows up for, the one who does the quiet maintenance, the one whose work gets called a hobby, and whose needs get called inconvenient, and whose accomplishments get described to strangers as a little something they do, I want to say this directly. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to say no out loud into a microphone in front of 250 people, and then put your earring back on and walk out. You are allowed to build something and own it and refuse to give it away because someone else decided your wanting it was less important than their wanting it. Protecting yourself is not the opposite of being a good person. It is what a good person does. That's my story. If you made it to the end, thank you. I mean that without any performance in it. Drop a comment and tell me, is there someone in your life who has shown up quietly for years while everyone else collected the credit? Tell me their name. They deserve to be said out loud. If this story reminded you of something true about yourself, share it. Someone you know needs to hear it today. Subscribe if you're new here. There are more of these stories. They do not get simpler or smaller. I will see you in the next one.